All right, so I've been wanting to try mono for quite a bit now. Just kept putting it off, mainly because of the expense that it comes with. In my mind, I was always going to replace what I have now, my color stuff, my camera with the IMX571 sensor, with a mono version of that from whichever manufacturer. It didn't make a difference. I just knew that that was the field of view I'd probably stick with. But then I came across a bundle from ToupTek. It's not the same sensor. It's actually the Sony sensor IMX585, but they have a bundle that is their ATR585 camera with an 8-position inch-and-a-quarter filter wheel. So L, R, G, B, and the narrowband filters, S, H, and O. All that together, the camera, the filter wheel, and all 7 of those filters were $929 American. So for me, that was very enticing, right? So I reached out to them and they agreed to loan me the equipment so I could do this review, so I can do some testing with it. I've had it for about a month and I've used it every clear night that I had. And I have the choice of either sending this back to them or I can purchase it from them with a discount. So this is a nice entry-level system, like I said, for under $1,000. If you want to play around with mono, you're not going to break the bank. So let's get to it. My name is Rich and you're watching Deep Space Astro. So we'll start with the camera itself and to show you what you can expect to get in the box. The camera itself. So on the back we have our USB connection, 2 USB ports for the hub, 12-volt power in, as well as 4 indicator lights on the bottom. Nice rubber dust cap for the sensor, and you can see the built-in sensor heater around the edges there as well. It also comes with all the adapters that you would need to connect it to your telescope, and this should be our power adapter and USB cable. Well, actually, power cord for the power adapter and the USB cable, and it looks like the power adapter itself, the brick, is in this box here. Yep, and it is. So I won't be using this because I have a power distribution box that I'll be using with the setup, but it's still nice that they provide that for you, so you have everything you need to get started. So let's put this stuff back in the box and take a look at the filters and the filter wheel. So it comes with 7 filters. We have our L, R, G, and B, so our luminance, red, green, and blue. And then we also have a set of SHO, so sulfur 2, hydrogen alpha, and oxygen 3. And in the filter wheel box itself is, as expected, the filter wheel. There's a single USB port on the back that will plug into one of the hub ports on the back of the camera. And they also give you a dust cap on the back of this. You can see the 1.25-inch filter holders in the carousel. So USB cable and a little screwdriver and some screws, it looks like, for getting everything mounted, as well as all the adapters you could possibly need to get everything hooked up. So next step will be for me to get these filters into the filter drawer, which is just a matter of removing all these screws to get the plate off and installing all 7 of our filters in here. Okay, the screws off. This plate should lift right up for us. Okay, so now we can attach the camera to the filter wheel. Just so you know, you can thread the camera directly into the filter wheel with the correct adapters. If you take that route, just make sure what you use doesn't bottom out on the filter wheel itself. That could cause an issue, obviously. I'm going to use the provided M2.5 screws that will go into these threaded holes here to attach the camera. So we need to do that from the inside of the filter wheel. And at first glance, you might think that you have to pull the whole carousel out of here, but that is in fact not the case. You can see the first 2 screw holes right here are easily accessible right through the filter slots. And then the top 2, they have holes large enough to get the screws through the carousel, through the back of the filter wheel, and into the camera. Now, this is slot 1. That's where these 2 holes exist. They don't exist anywhere else around the carousel. So make sure slot 1 is at the top. And then it's just a matter of attaching the 4 screws to the camera. So I am going to start with the ones that are easy to get to. Then just making sure that the holes are lined up in the carousel, because it looks like the head of these screws are just small enough to feed through there. So we're just gonna drop them in place, snug them down. Okay, so that's it. We got the camera in place and we're ready to load up the filters. I'm just gonna blow out the sensor here real quick on the camera before doing so. And I'm just going to use 1, 2, 3, and 4 for luminance, red, green, and blue. I think that makes the most sense. Give them a dusting on the bottom side before putting it in. And then 5, 6, and 7, we will do SHO. All right, so with filters installed. Just want to blow everything off before we put the cover back on. Replace all the screws, and we're ready to rock and roll. So now that we have all the filters in and everything put back together, the one thing to pay particular attention to are the threaded holes around here. This is to attach it to an off-axis guider. It can also be a possible source of light leak to get into the filter wheel, which obviously we don't want. So I am going to just throw some small pieces of electrical tape onto each of these holes, and just like that, and that should take care of it for us. So I'm going to start by getting this mounted up on my Redcat 51, spend a few nights with it, and then probably move it over to my 8-inch and do the same thing over there. Okay, so I'm using the camera and the filter wheel within N.I.N.A. That's my acquisition software that I always use. And N.I.N.A does have native support for ToupTek for the camera anyways, but there's also a updated driver, time of recording from September 1st, 2025 here for the camera. So if you have any issues with the native drivers in N.I.N.A, I'd recommend downloading the latest from their website here. And there's also, if we come up in the download in the firmware, there is a updated firmware both for the color and the monochrome versions dated September 22nd of this year, and as well as a firmware update for the filter wheel. Now I know the filter wheel, I seen reports a while back where there was an issue with the infrared sensor, I believe, inside the filter wheel itself to determine what position it's in that was causing some kind of glow within the wheel. So they fixed that with a firmware version, but again, they've updated it for some other improvements and other possible issues here too. So just want to make you aware of it. I did upgrade my firmware and my drivers a few weeks ago when I received everything. I'm not running these latest firmware versions right now, but like I said, just to make you aware that you may want to consider upgrading the drivers and the firmware for both units. You can see here I am connected in N.I.N.A right now, and the first thing that I wanted to point out, bring to your attention, it's not an issue, but again, just wanted to make you aware of it, is on both my Redcat and my Edge HD, the first time that I connected it with N.I.N.A, not only was my dew heater on, the dew heater that sits around the sensor, but the dew heater target strength was set all the way up to 4. And I didn't realize either one of those two were at those settings. And when I was testing cooling the sensor, it was never reaching the minus 10 degrees Celsius. And I was just sitting in my office, which was probably about, I don't know, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere around there. So it wasn't that hot where it shouldn't have been able to overcome the ambient temperature. When I spun around to take a look at the camera and I put my hand on it, it was noticeably warm. And I thought that was kind of odd because I've never had a cold camera feel that warm to the touch before. And then when I came back into my settings, like I said, the dew strength was all the way up to 4. So I cranked it back down to 1, and within probably 10-15 seconds, I hit my minus 10 degrees Celsius. So be aware of that. That heater at full strength is just that. It is full strength. It'll keep that thing nice and toasty for you and possibly prevent you from being able to cool the sensor to the temperature that you want to get it down to. A second thing was the default gain and default offset. Those came in at 210 and 30. Looking at the graphs on ToupTek's site, I set my gain at 100, which seems to be about the unity gain, as well as bumped up the offset to 500 to get the histogram off the left side of the graph. And other people that have reviewed the camera have come up with the same conclusion. We have 3 different readout modes for both snapshots and sequences. Default is your HCG, your high conversion gain. And what's different from ToupTek's implementation of the LCG and the HCG is you can set these when you want, where other manufacturers tend to flip them automatically. So depending on the gain that you're running, if you set your gain higher, for example, the driver will then flip into that high conversion gain at a specified default gain that you wanted to image in. With ToupTek's implementation, it doesn't do that. You can choose when you want to be in low conversion or high conversion gain. For the most part, I've been using the high conversion gain for my testing. There also, you probably notice, is a high dynamic range, which my understanding again from ToupTek is when you're running in an HDR mode, it is effectively taking 2 images, one in the high conversion gain and one in the low conversion gain, and then kind of blending those 2 images together to give you your final image that you would get out of N.I.N.A when the exposure time is completed. Probably good for stuff like the Orion Nebula, something with, it's got that really bright core for the trapezium, but you want to pull out all the faint dust that's around it as well. I haven't been able to do a lot of testing with it. I did try it one night on the same object and compared it to the same object that I shot with the high conversion gain. and to my eye, I didn't see any difference. But again, I think you really need to be shooting an image that has some really bright areas and some really dim areas that you're interested in capturing in the same shot. So more testing needs to be done from me on that. But some of you that have seen me posting images that I've been taking with this camera and own the camera yourself have told me that the high dynamic range works very well for you. So I'm going to believe what people have been telling me, that it's a nice little bonus feature within this camera. The other thing, you see LED lights. So on the back of the camera, there are 4 LED lights that illuminate during operation. If you want, you can turn those off. And then as you can see up on top here, the driver is giving us all the information that we need to talk about, but our sensor size is 3840 by 2160 with a 2.9 pixel size. And then we have our minimum exposure time of 0.0001 seconds up to a max exposure time of 3600 seconds. All right, so let's jump over into Siril now, and I'll show you some of the individual subframes that I've taken with the camera. First on the Redcat 51, and then I'll show you some that I did on the Edge HD SCT scope. So the first object that I shot using the new setup was using the LRGB filters, and that was the Iris Nebula. So I just started with 5-minute exposures, both for luminance, red, green, and blue. And we'll bring over and show you the luminance first, go into an auto stretch. Of course, we got our satellite shooting through and everything, but so that's the luminance filter. And we can take a look at the red filter here, and then green, and then the blue. And I tell you, it's something, like I said, this is my first time doing mono, so it's something to see these come down in black and white instead of color this time. But when you make the jump from color to mono, you can start to see more detail, which is the main reason why I wanted to play around with a setup like this. So those are the individual frames. This is the completed and composited stack, just in an auto stretch view. And you can see, I mean, the star colors look good to me. At the end of the video, I'll show you guys the final results for this image, as well as the other ones that I'm going to be showing you here too. So that's the iris in broadband, right? L, R, G, and B. And then I wanted to obviously play with the narrowband stuff. So what I did with the narrowband was I picked a Cygnus wall in NGC 7000. So I'll do the same thing here. These were all 5-minute exposures. And this is our sulfur channel. And to me, my untrained eye, right? Because again, I'm just getting in the mono. I mean, the stars look good. I'm not seeing like crazy, what I would consider to be bad haloing on the stars. But again, I'm just learning this as we go. I just wanted to take you guys on my little journey with me as I go through this stuff here. So that's sulfur 2. Then I ran the same against the hydrogen alpha, which is where a lot of our data is, right? That's just gorgeous. And same thing. I mean, I think the stars look good. This is Redcat 51, so we're at f4.9 on the focal ratio. And then oxygen 3. Not much oxygen 3 in this area, but you do still see some of the data. And then this is my final composited stack, just color corrected. I haven't done any work on this yet. Again, I'll show you this finished image at the end of the video as well. So again, I mean, I'm super excited with this stuff. Mono's been a long time coming for me, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So let's take a look at what I did next, which was move the camera off of the Redcat and put it on the back of the Celestron Edge HD 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain. This is my sulfur, and may or may not be able to see it, but this is a very zoomed in view of the Elephant Trunk Nebula, and we'll see it more with the HA. So here's the 5-minute HA frame, which that's just, I love that. That just looks really cool. And then 03, which is hardly anything there at all. You can see a very faint outline of the trunk. So that brings up another point too. How zoomed in, how cropped in this camera is on my 8-inch. So the native focal length on the 8-inch is 2032 millimeters. I have the 0.7x reducer on there, so that brings me down to 1422 on the focal length, but that really gets me in tight. So it's not necessarily great for nebula, and I can show you the difference in field of view between the two scopes with the same camera. So this is the ToupTek camera on the 8-inch scope, and that's the field of view we're currently looking at over here in Siril. And if I was just to change this over to my Redcat, take the reducer off, same camera, different scope. Here's the little piece of the elephant trunk that we were zoomed in on. You can see we get a lot wider field of view just putting it on the Redcat, which is 250 millimeters. So not the greatest for large nebulae like this, but if you wanted to do, you know, something that's smaller, like say M82, right? So on the Redcat, that's what we're looking at. But if I was to put my reducer back on and go back over the 8-inch, you can see the difference, right? I can get right into the cigar galaxy, where on the Redcat, I can get bodes and everything else that's around it too. So it really helps when you're wanting to get into something small, like the smaller galaxies, or even some of the smaller planetary nebulae and stuff. But if we go back over into Siril again, and we can take a look at the cigar galaxy that I did in LRGB, and we'll just go through the frames one at a time again. So this is the luminance for M82, and this is our red channel, this is our green channel, and then this is our blue channel. And, you know, let me tell you, being this cropped in, you can see these stars are always, they're looking a little bit wonky already. I feel like polar alignment and guiding really need to be spot on when you're going to be cropped in this tight on these objects. But got it done. Obviously, you can fix a lot of the star misshaping issues that you may have in post and everything. But this would be my final unprocessed stack right there that I was working with. So I am having a lot of fun with this little bundle. Like I said, I didn't want to spend a lot of money right out of the gate, just in case I find myself not enjoying the whole mono process, but I do. So I still have my color cameras. I'll be going back and forth basically, just depending on what I'm going to be shooting. And then maybe down the road, I'll look at getting, something more comparable to the Poseidon C that I have now in a mono version, which again would be the IMX 571 sensor, somewhere around there. So like I said, ToupTek has offered to give me a discount if I wanted to purchase this. So I am going to take them up on that offer and make this purchase. I also will have an affiliate link down in the description. So if you guys decide you want to purchase one, I'll get a small commission at no extra charge to you. So if you could use that link, it'd really help me out. I'd appreciate it. So before I show you my final process images that we were going over in this video, I just want to say thanks to all of my members, both here on YouTube and on Buy Me a Coffee. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks to all of you that are subscribers, that share and have nothing but good things to say about my content online. I see you guys out there, and I really do appreciate it. So here are the images that I've taken with this fantastic little mono budget-friendly setup from ToupTek. Hope you guys enjoy them. Thanks for watching, and clear skies.